So this is, as you all know, it's commissioned by ESRC and part of the Rebuilding Economics Project. Now I want to begin by just arguing that I think data is really, really important. It's the main driver of scientific progress, I would argue. There's a close bi-directional feedback between the way we collect data and the models we're developing and what we're trying to do, and you really can't think about one without thinking about the other. In my experience now for doing economics for, well, if you count my time as a financial practitioner, about 28 years, data is hard to come by. Spend a lot of my effort trying to find data, trying to clean up the data, and examine the data. I would argue it's the bottleneck to progress in economics. Economists think they're doing great data collection and all that. I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. And I'll explain why. I think we need a new theoretical framework that will enhance our notions about what data we should collect and can collect. And I think we should also be thinking, as part of the spirit of this conference, being more interdisciplinary and trying to connect sociological data and economic data better. Now, as an example of what happens when you run out of data, I'm going to pick on physics. I'm a physicist by training. And in particular, you know, we're sort of stuck these days on the most fundamental questions. We're stuck particularly on one side. That's on particle physics. But particle physics, when I was in graduate school in the 70s, was the hottest field in physics. Now it's at a grinding halt. And the reason is because data has become exponentially more expensive. And we've sort of hit the point where society isn't willing to pony up money anymore to pay for data points. The last major data point was the observation of the Higgs boson, was a prediction made in 1964. So it means that all these theoreticians are hanging out way ahead of the data, and they can't tell which is right and which is wrong. So you need to prune off all the things that are wrong and focus on the course that's right. But it's stuck. And as a result of that, we can't sort out things like where are dark matter and dark energy coming from. Now on the other side, cosmology, which is where I started, is an area that's made enormous progress. Why? Because observations are orders of magnitude, many orders of magnitude better than they were when I was in graduate school. When I was in graduate school, one of my professors plotted the Hubble constant as a function of time. The Hubble constant is effectively the age of the universe. As a function of time, meaning what were the best observations of the Hubble constant. And we put it up on the blackboard and it was wandering around. He stood back and said, looks like a random walk, doesn't it? Uncertain to orders of magnitude. We now know up to 3 significant digits, 13.8 billion years. So it just shows what happens when you can measure things properly. Now, as an example of another example where a place things are working, take meteorology. There's now a Moore's law of meteorology. That is, I'm going to have to read it. Since 1980, the forecast accuracy D days ahead is equivalent to the forecast accuracy D-1 days ahead 10 years in the past. That is, if you took the models and the infrastructure 10 years in the past, every 10 years we get 1 day out better. And that's a big deal because forecasts get exponentially worse as you go into the future in meteorology because the weather's chaotic. One of the discoveries that I actually played a minor role in. Now, the global meteorology budget is $5 billion a year, roughly. The estimated economic impact, which I think is much less certain, is the order of $30 billion a year. So this is an investment that's really paying off. It's a case where things have gotten dramatically better, and there are really 3 things. Better theory, but the big ones are better data and better computers. Now, by the way, this is a publicly financed international effort. I would say it's the example of how we would like to have things work. Because this knowledge is just available to everybody. You know, it's been done in collaborations between the US and the Soviet Union and Russia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, economics. I estimate, fat thumb, the global economics budget for research is the order of $1 billion a year. And I did that by just kind of adding up salaries and stuff. How much of that is spent on data collection? I don't know, maybe $100 million a year? I'm not sure about that number. I'd like to pin these numbers down. Oh, I forgot to say, this is a work in progress. Claire and I are, we're only partway through, so I might say things that later on will prove to be wrong. I also wanted to say that some of the things I will say are my opinions and don't reflect those of the Rebuilding Macroeconomics Project, or might not, I can't say. Okay, but for comparison, take, say, CERN, which, you know, is where they look for elementary particles. They have a budget of $1 billion a year, and from their website, they claim they produce 49 petabytes of data a year. I had to look up what a petabyte is. A petabyte is 10 to the 15 bytes. So a gigabyte's 10 to the 9, a terabyte's 10 to the 12, petabyte's 10 to the 15. That is a hell of a lot of data. But now, just to make another comparison, U.S. Polar Research budget's about $1 billion a year. U.S. National Science Foundation, the whole thing is $8 billion a year. 30 million of that is spent on social science. It's tiny compared to the rest. The U.S. National Institute of Health is $34 billion. All of U.S. public research funding is under $100 billion, but the order of that. So economics is coming in tiny. You know, on the other hand, the economy burps, and we're talking trillions of dollars. So somehow there's a mismatch there. Now, in my experience, economic data is highly balkanized. There's data from publicly available known sources that everybody will go nod and go, yeah, I know about that. There's publicly data available from very obscure sources. It's out there in the public, but you can spend a lot of time on Google and you'll never notice it. You know, but you know, after years, somebody mentions it, and oh my God, there it is. You know, we've gotten data by searching the archives. We have a paper that we're about to submit that involved hiring a research assistant who went to Washington, D.C. and Michigan and looked at reams and reams of microfiche and, you know, photographed them, and we sent it off to India, and a bunch of guys in India, you know, digitized it all for us. And there's data you can get from scraping the internet, data you can get from buying it from providers. My personal wish list easily comes in at £2 million a year, and I'm sure we could get higher. And you know, we spend a lot of time developing relationships to access confidential data in various forms. That often involves sitting in a remote location. You know, you bump into somebody at a conference, you take them to dinner, you convince them you're okay, they finally agree to give it to you. It's not the way it should work. Now, you know, national accounting is a wonderful thing. So it was one of the cool things I learned about once I started doing economics. Developed in the mid-20th century, significantly boosted, the effort was boosted by World War II. Economies needed to know what they could do, what was feasible, what's infeasible. You know, the central purpose of national accounting, I would say, is to feed macro models, but also maybe to inform decision makers about various things. Data is collected largely by surveys. There's a lot of focus on aggregation, which drives me crazy. And I'd say the whole thing is really set up, it hasn't changed that much from the middle of the 20th century. A little better, but not much. Now, it's also interesting to look at data cultures in different fields. You can, for example, look at genomics, where if you want to publish in genomics, you have to load your data on the genomics database, or they're not going to publish your paper. So it's all there. You can just cruise around, look at all the data, it's free, fantastic. We're in the process of researching this more. This is one of the things we want to put in the report, because we think it's important to provide some kind of anthropological perspective and, you know, analysis of how data works in different fields. But I think this is one of the main places where things could work a lot better in economics. Now, macro in particular, I think, faces fundamental problems. The timescales are slow. Macro economies, you know, they change on timescales of years. Financial economy, financial stuff is faster. Financial markets can change in a matter of days in significant ways. There are vastly larger amounts of data in financial markets, but things are limited because the economy is constantly evolving. That means that if you're trying to do something like make a business cycle model, data from 50 years ago may not be as relevant as last year's data. And also the data has not been well recorded. There are at most maybe 10 or 12 well-recorded business cycles. You have them in different countries, but they're highly correlated. So there's very limited data. In fact, I estimate that if you're fitting an aggregate model and you look at how many significant digits of accuracy you actually have in fitting that model, you could compress that data into about 500 bytes. In other words, the entire data that it takes to fit a DSG or econometric model is about 500 bytes. Not much. Right, so I'll come back to disaggregating, and I'm looking at the clock, so I may speed up a little bit. But I want to just show a few examples. This is from my own work. So we've spent a lot of time thinking about technological progress. So you go out and you start looking for data sets. Well, let's see, for example, what do things cost on a fine-grained scale as a function of time? Well, there's almost no data. This data set, which I think is one of the best available, was put together by my postdoc Doyne with some help from high school students. The red trajectory you see, the lower red one, is the cost of transistors as a function of time that we got from Gordon Moore personally. A lot of the other data sets we copied out of books. You know, it's hard to find this data. And you can go to government agencies, like there's the producer price index and so on, but then they start aggregating things up at scales that really distort what's going on. They imply things like hedonistic cost adjustments that, through methods that I find frightening, and then distort these things. Because, you know, transistors have dropped in price at 40% per year for 50 or 60 years. Here's another data set that we laboriously gathered over the course of several years. This, by the way, relates to our sustainability discussion earlier. This is the cost of solar photovoltaics. This is the cost of wind. This is the cost of coal since the 19th century. Coal-fired electricity based on what the cost of coal is, because the dominant cost these days is the cost of coal. You can see why there's something pretty dramatic happening here. These curves behave dramatically different than all the rest of them. Similarly, when you look at production, over here, this is what fraction of global energy are these producing. Here's solar energy, here's wind, here's biofuels. You know, they're behaving very differently. In fact, solar energy, if it just stays on its current exponential increase of 40% per year, is going to supply 25% of energy in 9 years. Pretty remarkable. And it's going to be cheap. And it's going to get a lot cheaper. And we spent a lot of time studying that, but I want to keep moving here. That's not what this is about. But just say it's a hopeful note on climate change. I actually think energy will get significantly cheaper and cleaner just from purely economic reasons. We estimate the net present value, based on the study we did here, of the green energy transition is $5 trillion at a 4% discount rate. Meaning it's a net winner just in pure economic terms, irrespective of climate change. But you know, the data's a mess. We spent years collecting this data. This shows all the data sets we were able to find about wind. You can see they're scattering all over the place. Now, it's partly geography, but a lot of it is also just foibles in data collection. Now, the report so far, this is the rough outline. We're trying to survey existing data sources. I'll fly through that at lightning speed. We're looking at existing methods of data collection. We're looking at the challenges for doing these data collections, or for doing data collections that aren't being done. We're looking into ways of ensuring either transparency or confidentiality, or the right mixture of the two, the role of governments versus the private sector, and we're trying to present a vision of what can be done in the future. So here's some of the contents at a finer grained level. We're dividing data at present into 14 different types. This is all fluid, and one reason I want to at least flash this is because we're looking for feedback from other people. Our intent is to compile a report, post it on the Rebuilding Macro website, try and publish a summary, but try and make this a living document that we can update through time. This goes back to a fixation of mine ever since I read, some of you may have read Borges' story about the librarian who was in the library and is desperately searching for something. What is he searching for? The book that tells him where all the other books are. And I feel like that is my life as a scientist. I am that guy in that story. It's not fun. You know, we actually almost talked Google into building a database of databases, a database that would contain all the databases in the world. They never actually did that, but anyway, so it goes. So, okay. We're looking at international public sources like these. We're not going to be able to exhaustively collect them, but we want to collect as much as we can just to make it easier for those who follow in our wake. You know, these are some UK data sources. We're somewhat UK-centric. It's a UK project, but also it's easier to, you know, take a train over to, you know, Wales than it is to get on a plane and fly to Washington. So I'll just kind of flash through some of these. I'm not gonna, if you're interested, we hope to have something posted on the website within maybe 5 or 6 months. And then I'm hoping people will look at it and give us feedback. Just flashing along here. Treasury, Office of Budget Responsibility, BBC Markets, gov.uk, London Metals Exchange, Economic Statistics Center of Excellence. So, you know, it's all very economic centric too. As I said, we're also interested in sociological data, but we're trying to at least do the economic data first. Privately owned economic data, I've become much more expert in that. Had a lot of conversation with data providers. You know, even if you have the money, it's a surprising amount of work to get data from a data provider. Because you call them up and you have to figure out what they really have. They don't really want to tell you in a very clear way. And then you have to negotiate the price. You know, it could take weeks. And, you know, your graduate student comes back and says, I can't deal with it. You have to get on the phone with them, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, we've managed to get IHS Markit, which has an amazing data set, to get interested in just giving us a bunch of their data, help them out. So they're building a data lake, just to give you a feeling for where these things are headed. They're building a data lake with all their data. They've been acquiring companies like mad for the past decade. They have 70,000 data sets. They're dumping all this data into a data lake you can swim around in, you know, with your computer, and you can make requests to the curators. This is the curator of this data set, or the data might say it's available, just click, everybody can have it, or you contact the curator, and, you know, then you have a negotiation with the curator about whether you can get it and what you can do with it. And their vision is that you typically don't download the data, you just use the data in the cloud. You write a little Python script that allows you to use the data in the cloud, and you have, you know, resources up in the cloud, so they never have to take the data off of their site and give it to you, where you might do some wrong thing with it. Now, I want to spend just a couple of minutes painting my vision of Google economics. You know, I want to have Google economics. I want to be able to go around, I want to take my iPhone, I want to point it at any building, and I want to have it tell me, this is the economics behind that building. These are the kinds of people that are employed there. This is, you know, where their materials are supplied from. You know, give me all the economic statistics about everything in the economy. You know, I think if you think about, I mean, maps have played a big and important influence in discovery in the world. Our economic map of the world is pretty crappy. I mean, if you want to fly at 50,000 feet, it's okay. You can get the World Input-Output database. It'll tell you at the level of 45 industries and at the national level, you know, what the inputs and outputs are. 1.5 more minutes than you think. But anyway, but you can't really get a detailed picture. You can't zoom into that picture and see things the way you would like. Now, we're trying to think also about questions like who should collect and provide data. Roughly now, you know, there's for-profit organizations, there's the government, the Office of Financial Research, if somebody wants to ask me about that in the question session, it's an interesting story of, you know, great promise that didn't quite play out as it should have. There's a commons idea. I mean, I sometimes dream about starting something like Wikipedia, where we'll just hoover up lots of data and put it on websites and get people to work like Wikipedia, just to make all that data open and public. I spent 8 years I started, ran, and created a gigantic database as part of a hedge fund. I'll never do that again because I hate secrecy. Did vast amounts of work that in the end just went into, you know, making a bunch of money for people at UBS. Made some for me too, but okay. And then there are bandits, you know. You can hoover up data and like WikiLeaks does and post it. And well, maybe some of that left. Now, big questions about confidentiality and transparency that again, we're trying to make some intelligent analysis about who should own the data. It's a big question these days. What data should be public? What data should be proprietary? What should be confidential? How do we implement the policies we want to get what we want out of that? Is there an inherent trade-off between privacy and science, or privacy and transparency? Or, you know, are there some situations where we can do clever things with blockchains or other clever methods so that we can have our cake and eat it too. There are significant sociological, legal, and technical challenges there. You know, I think it's worth thinking, I think we should all rethink our views on this. I mean, I was amazed, for example, to discover in Finland, they just make income tax returns, they're public. They just post them all on a website. So the day they come out, every Finn is eagerly going, oh, look at what he did, you know, and then they have to, the big dudes have to come out with public statements about what they did. And, you know, there's a whole discussion in the media. Why not, is my attitude. I certainly think bank balance sheets should be public. Well, why do we keep all that stuff secret? If it was public, anybody could go look and find out when fishy stuff is going on. And we would have probably spotted the bubble of 2008 much quicker. So, climate change. And I think this is going to be a game changer in this, because if we're really going to monitor carbon emissions, we have to map out the global production network in detail. Because if you want to know how much emissions went into producing this iPhone, you have to go back through the whole global supply chain, and that global supply chain is amazingly complicated. It's at least 8 layers deep. It's completely international. Every continent except Antarctica is represented. I actually have a nice picture. I should put it in here. But we have to understand those economic activities in detail, and you really want to do it at the level of geography and firms. You know. Now, so I think that could change a lot. I think an inspirational example of how a government can do something pretty lightweight that can make a gigantic difference are the Chileans, who've implemented a new requirements for VAT tax reporting. They just added a few fields. So when you swipe a zebra stripe in Chile, it goes off to the Chilean government and it records what that product is. There's a code to say that's the product that got bought. The firm that is involved in it. If it's a transaction between 2 firms, it's recorded. And it means that now the Chileans can actually they can construct the detailed input-output network of their economy, right down to the level of individual retail and factories and so on. And they effectively see all the invoices and receipts flowing in and out, and they know who to put on there. Now, there's a lot of new technologies for collecting data. I don't think we should be having to rely on surveys anymore. I mean, there may be instances where surveys are a good thing to do, but we can do a lot better. I think a tool that's transforming things, and I'm disturbed I haven't heard anything about here today, is natural language processing. Natural language processing is a remarkably powerful tool. It means that increasingly you can make intelligent inferences about large bodies of text. We're using that to try and do things like hook patents up to firms and consumers and all kinds of stuff. And I think particularly when you want to start understanding the more how the economy is really affecting people can make a big difference. I think better data could revolutionize economics. Economics is already becoming more empirical. It's already moving towards disaggregated models. I think that still needs a big boost. Complexity economists have been saying we need to do this for 30 years now. And we think it's essential if you want to actually understand the economy. You have to be able to go down to a fine-grained level where you can simulate what's going on, and rather than aggregating data, you let the interactions become emergent and track them as they go up. And if we want to understand, climate change inequality, coupling of the financial system to the macro, we need to do that.